Before I introduce myself, just wanted to set some context behind my thinking process. So this is one of the person my 8-year-old has become a big fan of, and probably all of us are a fan of. And I recently came across this quote, and it so much resonated with me. Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything which counts can be counted. And that has been a big philosophy when we first laid out the vision of the data function at Poshmark. And then, empowered by the people, culture, and technology, I spent my last 4 years building out the data function at a small company. It was a small company at that time, 30 people company, Poshmark. Who here has heard about Poshmark? Okay, that's great to hear. It's like half of the company, half of the crowd here who's heard about Poshmark. But just as a quick introduction, my name is Barkha Saxena. I lead data function at Poshmark, have been there for 4 years. My career has been in the data science world before it was called data science, the days when it was called the predictive analytics and optimization and different things. So a little bit about Poshmark for those who might not know it or might not know as well. We are a mobile social fashion marketplace. Where our goal is to bring millions of buyers and sellers together to engage in a fun shopping experience. Our users are very engaged, and users spend like 20 to 25 minutes per day in the app. So they are browsing different listings, they are talking to other Poshers in the platform. And a lot of this energy is driven by the buyers as well as what we call the seller stylists. These are the people in the platform who are talking to buyers, providing them full service, starting from styling them, recommending them merchandise, connecting them with all the people, and giving them full service to make sure they have a good buying experience. We have 25 plus million items across 5,000 brands, and there are 3 million seller stylists which are bringing these merchandise in front of the buyers. In the world where everything is about, we are trying to automate everything and we are trying to personalize everything, we are taking a different look at it. We feel like the shopping is still one of the experiences where human touch matters. So think of the old days. I mean, I know many of you are so young that you might not remember, but when I was a child, I remember that when we went to this shop to buy stuff, that the shopkeeper knew about the whole history of like my brother and sister, which grade we are in, and what we like, what we don't like, and that made the whole experience so personal that we wouldn't go to new shops. We'll just keep going back to the same person. And that's what we are trying to do at Poshmark, that yes, there is a personalized aspect of it, that in your feed, we show you the items which are more personalized to you, but we believe in helping you building these personal connections with other users so that the people who you are buying from or the people who are selling to, you actually know them very well. Like we look at the text in the comments, people are talking about someone is getting married, someone is having a baby. Over time, a term our users have actually coined, they call it PFF, which is the Poshmark Fast Friends. So people are really building very close human connections, and that is the biggest differentiator about Poshmark. What that leads to, given the number of like these 25 plus million items people are interacting with, along with the social interactions, people are liking things, sharing items, talking to each other, and a lot of commerce transaction, it leads to 200 plus million loggable events every day. So as we move into the big data landscape, what are some of the unique challenges about Poshmark? Because big data is everywhere. I mean, that's what this conference is about. The unique challenge which we are facing today is, first of all, we are a startup growing, right? So we have to take one step at a time. And in that environment, so first of all, we have this high volume social data, which is not uniform throughout the day. We have these bursts of engagements. We do these Posh parties where suddenly there's a lot of energy, the traffic picks up and a lot of activities happening. But at the same time, we also need the 100% accuracy in commerce data. So commerce data is not where we can accept even the 0.001% loss of any event, because money has to be recorded well. And at the same time, we have this exponential growth in activity data. So if we built anything thinking about where we are today or next week, it's going to fail a month later. So we have to just build things thinking how we can keep them stable and running for a relatively longer period of time. And in this world of data, when I walked in 4 years ago, and my job was to figure out how do we create value from the data, then the question was, where do we start? And as I thought about that question, I thought about this framework of data science evaluation. And if you think about the data science investment, it starts from just looking at the simple data and getting insights from unidimensional data. So how many orders we are getting, how many users joining, how many active users I have on the platform. Then from there, it goes to looking at the things in multi-dimension. So you start looking at different types of users coming on different platforms, the new users, the older users. But as soon as you start looking at this multi-dimension, so 2-dimension human can process very easily. 3 also you can. 4 also you can process. But when it goes beyond 4 dimensions, at least I know I can't process and remember all the trends for a very long period of time. That's when we start looking into the machine learning and data science approaches to make sense of this data. Then from there, but initially we still look at these machine learning models to still understand and that drive strategic decisions, but not really driving the real-time decisions. From there, the next stage becomes when we take it to drive the real-time decisions. So you start to productionize these machine learning models in a real environment, and they are driving real-time decisioning. And then from there, this is the last piece, which, today we are still talking about the big data models, where people talk about one model at a time. But in the old days, when we didn't work on the big data, but the data science was at a very different level, when you are building these multiple models, they are driving different types of decisions. But when those different types of decisions are being made on the same user, sometimes they will conflict. And when that situation happens, then you have to come up with an optimization framework where you can put multiple models together and make an optimal decision, which might mean that based on a model A, you are making the really bad decision, and based on the model B, you are making a better decision, but the two going in different direction still is the best decision. And I'm sure you all have seen versions of this slide in many places, because everybody talks about it. The difference here is that, you see, I have the y-axis missing. So generally, people also put a y-axis here, which says the value. So they say as the investment increases, the value increases. I do not believe in it. And mainly because at the different stages of the organization, every pieces of these have the value. So 4 years ago, if I would have wanted to do these machine learning model at Poshmark, that would have been a terrible decision. A lot of value we got a lot of value by just looking at the data, like simply downloading in Excel and having human look at it, what am I seeing there? So the value is not the function of at which stage we are. The value is related with at which stage your organization is and what you are ready to do. But at the same time, it is very critical that I think before we jump to the top step, we should have worked on each of these stages, because if you don't understand your data well, you are probably not going to be able to do as good job of building the best model in the world. Now, as we think about this data science evaluation, you need the data to be able to support the data science evaluation. And again, it's 4 simple steps. Of course, there are thousands of steps, but if you just zoom it out, it's the 4 major steps. The first one is, thinking from the startup perspective, you're just looking at the top financial metrics. Is my business growing or not growing? Then from there, you start to look at more granular metrics. You start to look at across multiple segments. And then from there, now you want to look at the user level data so that you can start to optimize your product and deliver a better experience. And then finally comes the event stream data, where even for the user, you are really trying to trace out the whole footprint so that even if the same user, 2 days walking through the 2 different journeys might be interested in 2 different things. So with this background in terms of what our thinking was as we developed the vision for the data journey at Poshmark, I want to share just a few highlights of the Poshmark journey. So as we say that the good beginning is half of the battle. When I walked in at Poshmark, we did have 2 data pipelines running. This was our version 0 in 2014. We had a real-time, totally homegrown pipeline running, where we were just collecting this event stream data using an internal sort of BI tool where we were basically just showing a lot of tables, which are showing some aggregated metrics. And we had a daily ETL pipeline running, but through a third-party vendor. We were using RJ Metrics, who was ingesting our data, and it was basically the whole ETL pipeline was sort of their headache. And we had a web-based interface where we could look at some of the cohort data. And as you might imagine, our homegrown system, despite having a very different volume of the data, was actually working really well. But what happened with these two pipelines running, and in a startup world where you have these 30 people in the company and everyone rightfully is empowered to do whatever they want to do, lot of dashboards and the reports were coming. And anybody who has been in the early days of the startup, you will know that you will start to see dashboards which will have the name underscore version 0, name underscore v2, or some orders underscore Barkha and order underscore Nia, like the different people who are building dashboard. So if someone wants to figure out how are my orders trending, they have no idea which of these 10 things have that data. Then they were inconsistent in data definitions because, again, think of the startup environment, right? 3 people coding the buyer activation metric, they will have the 3 different definitions of it. Then each dashboard looked differently. So if any business user wanted to look at what the heck this is, you cannot expect 2 dashboards to have similar type of things. And then there were inefficiencies in visualization and trend analysis. Like there were times we will download the data and 3 people could not agree, is this metric going up or down, or is it stable? Like how hard do you think that could be? But it actually was hard. Like sometimes me and Manish, who's our CEO and very data-driven function, we will have arguments. I will say it's going down. He will say, no, it looks stable. But those were the pain points, and at that time, we didn't think we need more data. Our thinking was, we have a lot of data. Let's figure out how we can make effective use of it. And that's what led to our investment in what we call Newt. And I don't know how many of you are Harry Potter fan, but this comes from Harry Potter. So this is nastily exhausting wizard test. And it came because we thought this thing is becoming just a magic, like we don't know what's happening here. So we built this out internally. It's a visualization tool, but more than the tool, we took a product approach. So we standardized the definitions. We standardized what each of the dashboards should look like. We also put a police what metrics are going in here or not. We could not, this place was not allowed for everybody's playground. Like you need things to get there, there was a process to get in there. So I guess we started to go up from the startup. We started to bring a little bit more process in terms of how we are managing things. And then from there, as we stabilized that pipeline, at the same time, we did start to think in terms of, okay, what's going to happen to our cohort data, because this is not giving us. And at the same time, the pipeline we had to this third party, it was just way behind. Like sometimes we won't have data for 7 days. And in a startup world, not having any information for 7 days was just not acceptable. But as we started to think, hey, we have to do our own ETL pipeline, the very first question was build or buy. Well, we had only one data engineer, and there was me, and I'm not a data engineer. So it was a pretty easy decision. So we basically hired a consultant, a consulting firm. They built a ETL app, which basically was doing a nightly ETL of our data from MongoDB to Redshift. And there was a lot of discussion. They wanted to build us all these custom reports in Redshift, and it took some time for me to make them understand that we are not totally data naive people either. We can run SQL queries and make sense of things. So give me the raw data, because if I tell you the definitions today, I can guarantee you in 3 months, based on what we learn, we're going to change definitions. And I don't want to keep coming back to you. So we got this thing built, and it worked until it didn't. And this is where we have learned, like, external help actually is a good thing to give us a start, but it doesn't always scale. And we started to get into the same place, like ETL won't happen for 3-4 days, because they just didn't build for the exponential growth we had. Even if we had explained them that this is going to happen, we also grew at a much faster rate than we had imagined, and it stopped working. So we ended up actually building a lot of ETL ourselves. I would say that what they had built gave us a really good start, because we reused a lot of building blocks, but it, again, made sure that we are building it, and plus our engineers getting trained on it, so that when the issues happen, we are not chasing a third party, and we can fix it at our end. And then finally, we wanted to democratize all this data. Like we didn't want, the only way we could scale the consumption of data was making it easily accessible to everyone. Because if everyone is relying on the team of 2 data analysts to provide them information, they are not going to have it. So that's why we implemented Looker, which became our visualization platform, and the whole company started to use Looker. I mean, as I hear, like, we are one of the few companies where they see like all sorts of random people using it. Community survey associates use Looker to learn how the different metrics are doing in their world. And then it was time for our last step of thinking about the event stream data. And as we moved into the event stream data, this is not the world I had worked in with. So it was an amazing learning experience. We spent first 2-3 months just thinking about the event structure. And now looking back, it seems like it was such a great investment just to think about what should an event be called. And it's as simple as when somebody is making a comment, am I going to call that user comment listing? Or am I going to call user posted a comment on the listing? And the two different verbs, two different event structure. We spent a lot of time upfront thinking through the event grammar, the entity definitions, how they're going to scale as we go to the next level. And then a lot of investment in training engineers so that the event firing is not done by just the data engineers, but the whole client app team as well as server team can write the code and fire these events. In the structure, we want them to be firing it. Then from there, of course, a lot of time was spent in building the data pipeline and the access of the data. And that's where we dealt with a lot of technology decisions. And this was definitely a time where I actually wish there was a playbook which could kind of tell me, like, this is how you should think, and these are the problems you're going to face. We didn't have that. So the two people who were doing it, 3 people, like our CTO, me, and our data engineer, none of us had experience in this. So it was kind of just struggling through it and making some mistakes on the way. But there were a lot of decisions, like Kinesis versus Kafka. Well, we went with Kinesis. The primary reason was we were on AWS. We were like, let's just keep it simple, right? It works that way. Which file format are we going to use? We used Avro to later learn that it was a wrong choice, and then we had to redo it, and then we went to Parquet. It was such a small thing we didn't learn, like, hey, in the environment where we are reading and writing data so many times, and we're reading column-based, there was no reason for us to go to Avro, but we didn't know, so we just went with it. Then what do we do with the Hadoop infrastructure? Do we do it ourselves, or do we engage with someone like Kubel? I mean, you all know how that went, given that I'm standing here, and thank you. And then query, right? How do we, like, which engine should we be using? And we initially started with Hive, and the query would take like 6 hours to run. Well, that wasn't going to work for us. Then we did like this big Excel sheet of like writing the pros and cons of every engine. And at that time, we picked Spark, and mainly because the Presto was very close, but it seemed like it wasn't as mature. And we were like, a bunch of us like who actually don't know what the heck is there. Let's just stick with the safe choices. But just yesterday, I spent my whole day just hearing in the cab about like how Presto has actually become very stable and like is the language which is preferred by the data scientists, so now we're going to use it. So again, the thing is we actually went through this whole journey by ad hocing and learning and researching, and we, of course, made some right decisions, some not so right decisions, and now we are just reiterating through it. Then after we were done all this, and then we started to initially we started with a very small set of events, and then we started to expand it, and then we started to hit different types of scaling issues, like the 3 people who thought about the grammar, apparently those were the only 3 people who understood it. We didn't realize how hard it was for other people to understand what the heck were we thinking. And we didn't want to go with the thinking that, hey, you do it because I'm telling you. We wanted to hear, like, what is the confusion, right, because of it. It took quite some time to understand what they're saying, and even if we didn't change the grammar, we changed the representation of it. So it became more intuitive to a larger group. And then we started hitting challenges with some simple things like the documentation, like how do you keep the documentation and actual implementation in sync? Like, seems like such like the old world problem, but they still exist, like especially in the world of the startups. Data QA, we were growing so fast, and as we enabled a lot of people to be able to fire events, it just started to just go all over. Like, you can fire something, and it might not actually be what you were supposed to do. And there is nobody queuing it until 3 months later, and now 3 months worth of data is wasted. Data access was an issue. Like, there were only 2 or 3 people who could actually run queries. So we built all this great data, but for everybody, it was just this something which is somewhere out there. We don't know, because we can't access it. That led us to the very first thing we had to figure out was the organizational ramp up. So we knew we had to do it, but we were kind of just like slowly going there, but then we were like, drop everything, let's go and hire people. So we finally, after like long-term search, we hired our director of data engineering, thank God. He came in, and then we basically built our data engineering team. From 1, it became 8 people team in just last year. We built out a proper data PM function whose job is to actually make sure that the events are being fired in the right way and everybody thinking about the structure, not just for the current users, but all the future usage which might come up. And then to make the access easier, we started thinking about the summarizing the data so that because when product managers are asking questions, they are really not trying to figure out the user A and user B. They're trying to figure things still out at the little bit more aggregated level. So we started thinking about like how we can put this data so we can ETL it into Redshift, and now everybody is comfortable with Looker, so let them just get access to it. So some of these things, now everybody actually feels that they have access to at least some part of the event stream data. We are still not at our ideal place, but it has at least become reality for everyone in the company and not just for the 3 people. So this is what our current pipeline looks like. So a lot of progress with a lot of mistakes and a lot of lesson learned. And you can see the top 2 still looks very similar, except that we replaced RJ Metrics from the Redshift, and we started to use our own visualization platform. The bottom one is all our event stream structure. And the one thing we are doing is, the latest thing we are trying is the real-time data streaming. We are testing out Druid and Grafana to see if we can actually make the event stream data even more easily and seamlessly accessible to a broader set of people. So as I mentioned multiple times, like this journey has been very exciting and fun, but it's not without a lot of lessons and some sleepless nights, like what did we do and what do we know? What do we do now? So from the learning perspective, there is no such thing as complete like hands-off outsourcing. Like if we would have just given like any pieces of it to somebody else and just thought that, okay, we can go back to and do our own things, in Redshift, we would have ended up with just a bunch of tables, which would have been useless a month later. So if you care about things like what's being built, the schema names, columns names, et cetera, you need to be pretty much stay involved. So you can outsource it, but it's not complete outsource. The scaling the knowledge, it's more difficult than we think, or I thought, because Poshmark was my first startup job. I was coming from the big companies where you have very well laid out training processes and the information knowledge transfer processes. It was a challenge for us to figure it out. We figured it out, and it was fun. And when you go through those some rough times, you actually end up making a lot of really close friends in any company. So it has been a very rewarding experience, but at the same time, just going through the pain of getting people like on the same page. Organizational. So first of all, it was a very team sport. So multiple teams working together to get this thing done. And then after it was done, and as we grew the team and we brought new people and we passed the torch, making sure that these new people stay as connected and as motivated to work together with that common theme and the vision we put out together. And sometimes these human problems are way more difficult to solve than a technology problems. And finally, now that we have all these amazing data, now we are starting to think that, hey, we are ready to take the data science to the 3rd and the 4th level. To be honest, we didn't do any classic data science for the first 2 years because we were busy just getting the data done. Now we are starting to do some data science. However, even in doing that, I'm still maintaining a very balanced approach. So the team is like pretty equally, not equally divided. Based on the value each of the pieces are bringing to the business as of today, there are people who still focus on more you might call the business insights, but looking at the data in more complicated way, or using the machine learning models to drive the insights, but not the models which are running in production. Just last year, we started to, we built a couple of models which went into production, and I just want to share like a couple of highlights about those models. So as I mentioned in the beginning, Poshmark is all about the social. So we connect people. Now, how do we connect people in the environment? So basically, 1 in 50 women are at Poshmark. So that means we have a lot of users. When a new user joins, when basically think of it, you walk in a party and you don't know anybody. Wouldn't you like somebody to actually make connections with certain people so you can feel more comfortable? So that's what this algorithm tries to do. When user joins, they provide some information about themselves, like their size, the gender, where they live, what kind of brands they like, what kind of styles they like. We take that data and we match them with the existing base based on what we drive the signals for your style, and we match you from the existing base. And as you start to leave more and more signal, we are always recommending you that, hey, here are the more people you should be connecting. So the more signals you leave with us, the richer that profile becomes, and we can connect you with more and more people. So this is the cycle which continues to go, because we connect you initially, and then so initially we connect you automatically. After that, we start giving you suggestions in like different places in the app. Hey, here are the people who have similar style as you, so you should connect with them. In terms of the modeling approach, I'm going to share it with a high level. Any technical details more than that, it will be my data scientist I will need to call to ask. But two approaches, again, to solve two types of problems. So one is when a user is just coming on board, and who do you connect with? That's where we use the approach 2, which is about we use the hierarchical clustering plus fashion experts. And through that, we've identified these clusters of the styles and the people who fall into it. But as you might imagine, each person can fall into multiple clusters. And when someone comes in and a match with the people who are in multiple clusters, how do you find who do you match with? So that's where we use the cosine similarities to figure out which cluster is the closest, and you can get matched there. The reason we did this approach 2 for this problem, because when you join Platform in the beginning, we only connect you with a small set of pre-selected users. We call them Posh Ambassador, which is a much smaller set. And you don't want a small set to be divided in like 40,000 segments, because that will mean very, very thin segment, and we want to connect, we want to help you make enough friends when you join. But when you become the part of the app and you start, and we are recommending people in the app, that thing goes away, because once you're in the app, we don't have to connect you with just the Posh Ambassador. Then you get connected with anyone in the platform. That's where we use the top approach, where again, the clustering is done by using the FP close algorithm. So again, we identify the clusters based on the styles where people are falling into the similar buckets. But again, to identify which cluster you are closest to, we use the cosine similarity. The second use case, this is the Poshmark webpage. So this is our desk. So Poshmark is multi-platform. We are on iPhone, Android, and web. This is our website, and this used to be our old page. I don't know if you can see it, but it was very static. Like, it had some information about Poshmark at the top, and then there was a section about the top brands, which was a very static page. Once in a while, probably we changed it, but generally it used to stay the way it was. From there, we moved into this dynamic page. And what that means is this page is the top section, it is called the top brands. And then the second section is called the currently trending brands. And the last section is the discover the community. And each of these sections are driven by the real-time activity which is happening in the platform. And this part is being powered through Qubole. So thank you. So not that we are just doing the machine learning, but we were able to deploy the algorithm. And the way the algorithm works is at the high level for the top brand section. So algorithm is not very complicated. So what it looks for is what are the top brands? Like it looks at the most listed, most purchased, and most searched. And based on the certain criteria, it figures out what am I going to show it to the user right now. With the constraint, make sure that if I end up refreshing my page 3 times, I should not see the same thing. And then for the trending brands, we look at the growth rate, because this is like the world of the fast fashion, where the brands come and go at a very high speed. So we look at the highest growth rates, and based on that, we show you different brands. And it actually makes the experience very interesting for the fashion people coming into the page and just constantly seeing new inventory and the new brands. Actually makes it a very engaging browsing experience. And on the community side, because of course we are a social platform, we show that, hey, here are the people who are currently active in the platform, and here are the types of activities they are doing. But we balance it out to make sure we are spreading the love. So if there is a user who just happened to be sitting and sharing, we're not going to keep showing the same user. We will show you other users so that you can continue to know the broader set of community. So the two aspects of this pipeline, right? So there was an algorithm to select the brands and the people we should be showing, and then there was a data pipeline to enable the feature. So this was actually our first feature where we actually successfully deployed it, and so we were all very excited. For a lot of people, this might seem like such a small thing, because I mean, I have spent 2 days hearing about all these great things people are doing. But if you think of from the perspective of like this startup where we started with like nothing 4 years ago, it feels like we have come a long way. What are some of the things we are looking to do in real time, in near real time? Not near real time, it's like near future. It's the very first thing which is at the top of my mind is we now have a lot of data, and there are a lot of KPIs we are monitoring every day to make sure there are no disruptions in the business. If it's a good one, we want to capitalize on it. If it's a bad one, we want to tackle it. there are so many KPIs that it becomes very human intensive to detect the anomaly. And especially in our business, which is growing and we have a strong seasonality, the weekly and the yearly, it becomes very hard. So we have been trying some techniques internally, and currently we are doing a POC with a third party to figure out like how do we do the automated anomaly detection so that we can quickly just look at the thing which have been flagged as opposed to keeping track of these hundreds of KPIs. I already mentioned that we are looking at Druid and Grafana for the event streaming so that people have even more seamless access to the event stream data. Scaling data science is a big initiative at Poshmark this year. Like we have hired a lot of data scientists, and we are working on putting a lot of like the tools together to make sure that as we are hiring these data scientists, they have the infrastructure and the tool set ready for them to be able to start delivering the value. Because now we are at the stage that where we think investing in these big solutions can actually help Poshmark take to the next level. And the last piece is just looking at the S3 data, not the streaming, but for the product analytics and some of the feature development, we still rely on, like for the complicated stuff, it still comes down to the data scientist to be able to pull the data, analyze it, and give it to whosoever is trying to work on that feature. We want to make that process even more seamless. So we have made a lot of good progress, but it's still, I feel that my team is a bottleneck for business users to get access to the data. And my dream is that anyone in the organization should be able to access any data wherever it is, as long as we take care of the security part of it, which is, of course, the other thing we are working on. I think that's pretty much it for this little fun journey at Poshmark.
Any questions? Hey, first, applause for the really structured way that you went about designing your data science stack. That's awesome. Question about, so you mentioned where you were kind of surfacing information products to users, you have new content with every refresh. How do you balance fresh content with relevant content in this context?
So you're talking about this one. Good question. So in this one, this is not personalized for the user. This one is just to show you the fresh content. So at Poshmark, we always believed that given all the fashion data we have, we should be the voice to say, hey, what is trending and what is the fashion of the today. So that's what the goal of doing this page was. It's not personalized to a user. So.
But are you still algorithmically pulling data, right? To show, algorithmically pulling content to show. See what I'm saying? Like, so are you at 100% explore, or are you doing any kind of exploit at all to see the things that people?
This is totally just looking at what's happening. The only criteria here is I want to show you the most recent content, and it needs to be refreshed. So for example, I don't want to keep showing you the same content again and again. So even if, let's say, the same set of 6 brands comes out to be trending right now, I'm going to pick the 6 before that to make sure that you're looking at different sets. You and I, even if we have different style, I mean, even if we have different preferences, chances are we might still see the same brands. So it's not at all customized to the user. It's just the recency of the data and what's across the whole pool is trending. But I would say this was the web page. If you look at the app, that's where it's actually personalized to the user. And the way it's done is that's where we look at the things, the brands you might have interacted with recently, or the items you might have searched recently, that leads to or the users you are connected with what they are doing. So in the feed, it's personalized. This one is actually, let me take it back. This one is also personalized if you're logged in. This is the logout page. So this is the visitor who has not left a lot of mark in terms like Poshmark. But if you log in, and then you are a user who we know, then it's personalized, because then we have a lot more data about you as a user, and we know what content you have searched, what you have bought, what you have searched. That's where we are looking at it. You know, it actually gets refreshed, and here is why. Because even if you didn't search or follow new brands, the users you are following, they might have done something different. So it still gets refreshed, but because in the refresh, there are multiple things. So your preference, but your preference are also coupled with, if I'm following, like let's say, 1,000 other users, if they are liking certain other content and they are sharing some content, my feed will start to show that. So even if your specific signals have not changed, the people you are following, their signals have changed. So it still gets refreshed for that reason.
I had a question about product management. So you mentioned earlier on the point where you brought in a data PM, and I was wondering, now that you're scaling out your data science team, have you hit that need yet to bring up product management into the data science product lifecycle to help with discovery, UX, et cetera? Or are the data scientists expected to be that domain expert on their own?
I do not expect them to be there, but I expect them to get trained. So what we are doing is, so the data PM function, we started with one person. That's not going to scale at all. So what we are doing is, first of all, we have hired a couple other people who come with that thinking of like organization of the tables and the schema, et cetera, and thinking about it. But at the same time, everyone in my team who is working with any product manager working on the feature is being trained to make sure they are starting to think this. So data PM work is a lot more in giving the structure and the definition and how we should be thinking and the training. But she's not the person solely responsible for like every single place in the organization where data is coming. Are we at the ideal place? No, not at all. So we still have like some processes built in to make sure that if some mistakes happen in the place, because not everybody is at the same place or at the same maturity level, we have a way to catch it. We still don't catch it sometimes, but mostly we catch it. As I said, I don't expect people to come on with knowing that, but because it's so core to what we believe at Poshmark, we train people in that thinking.
What about, so that's like the data access and data standardization side to make sure everyone's using the data in the right way. What about pairing with product to be developing the right solutions to surface to the right people?
Yes, so the way this works is, so the way my team is structured, so we are not at the scale that where we can have a dedicated people working with the PM. So we still have like the classic pipeline of here is the workload and we figure out who is working with who. And the way the work happens is a data scientist or analyst get involved in the ideation phase. So it can happen two ways, right? So first is during some project, we might learn something which might be useful for example, I might be working on just the feed algorithm, but I might learn something which can give some insight. Hey, if we change this on the user onboarding journey, it might have made a difference. So we share that information with PM, and as PM starts to work on that idea, that PM will find the right analyst who might have some information, and they will work on the ideation. So PM still leads in terms of what needs to be done, but the analysts and the scientists bring the data knowledge and make recommendation that we think we should be looking at this as well and that as well, because they actually know the depth and the breadth of the data which exists, also what we can do. Because today, our PM still feels like, many of them have been with us for a very long time, and they still feel that if I ask for this data, it's going to take like, I don't know, months. And they're like, no, we can have it like in half an hour. So that pairing is from so sometimes we find the insights and we communicate it to the PM team and then work on the idea. Many times PMs are working on the idea, but as they are in the ideation stage itself, they start to work with the data scientists to just explore. Because in every product idea, you can go in so many directions that they work with in developing the idea with that data scientists together. And as the feature launches, they are the one who are working. So my team is responsible in figuring out what metrics, basically what the success will be called. So at Poshmark, we have done this part. So we have yet not made the analytics part of the product, just for the reason we believe that we need an unbiased opinion of did it work or not work, because we are not married to a feature. So it is the job of so they provide all the support, but the data scientist is the one who at the end has to make a call did the feature work or not work. And for that reason also, we actually shuffle people, because we don't want people to just become we don't want data scientists to start becoming biased, because they have been just part of this feature pool for a very long time. But we are still only 200 people company, and organizational structures are one of those things. It evolves. It evolves even in the big organization, and we are definitely at the scale that I'm sure a year later, if you ask me the same question, my answer might be totally different. Maybe it does make sense to just make these pairs which exist to eternity.
It seems like with fashion, there's a lot of seasonality that goes into things, swimsuits in summer, jackets when it's cold. Do you guys are you able to pick up on those trends just from user behavior within the app, or is there anything that you pull in from external sources like Twitter APIs for new trends, or just knowing what to recommend because of a certain timeline?
No, we are able to actually pick it up from our data. And you think about it, right, where you have 25 plus million activities and 1 in 50 women on the platform. We have very rich data, and our data is just the fashion data. So we are able to pick it up, and the way we use that data is, first of all, in the user acquisition side. Our ads change because we know, and it's not the summer versus winter, they change monthly, and some of the things which I didn't know and would not have thought about it, that you actually start to sell swimsuits in February and March because people prepare for in advance. So these are the things we have learned, and similarly, these brands sometimes like they come up, and before like there is a line on Target, we have just picked it up because people are talking about that specific brand in the platform, and we know that, hey, this is going to come. Now, the only thing we can do in that case, because we are not a retailer, we basically educate our sellers, like, hey, this brand is trending, so they can basically put the inventory. Brand is trending, or the sunglasses seems to be like the thing which is just in fashion. So every month or so, we do this trends report, where we educate our sellers in terms of what's coming up based on our last 6 years of data. This is what we expect to happen, and so that they can prepare their closet with new types of inventory.
Perfect. All right. It's a great session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.